So, observations of the round, Hoyne?
Yeah, so we're going to start with brains over brawn. Okay, so this is where it's a bit of just a bigger picture conversation around where the game is going. So what do you value? Do you value the brawn with how you win contests, your toughness, your muscle to be able to extract contested possessions, extract clearances? Or do you value the brain, which is the ball use, the outside game, getting into space, and then the creativity, looking upfield, how do I put my teammates in a better position? And the reality is that we keep talking about this on this show in 2025. Give me the brain over the brawn. Okay, so if you have greater impact with how you use the footy than what your oppo does, you're winning 80% of matches this year. If you have greater impact with the brawn, how you're actually winning the footy, you're winning 70% of matches. So still high, but what you're doing with how you use it, that is modern day footy, and it's why our rating system this year, which has caused a few eyebrows, it's why so many halfback flankers are so high up because it's how you use it over how you win it. And I want to just get into it as to why this is the case, right? So you think about contest, and if you're relying on bashing up your opposition to win games of footy, that will get the job done throughout a home and away season and will get you a starting place on the grid. But when you get towards the end of the final series, the reality is you're coming up against teams that can handle their own in a contest situation. It's not, they might not necessarily, rely on winning contests and clearance and bashing you up in that area, but they'll hold their own. So just think of the last two final series, right? And the last two premiers. So Brisbane last year played in 4 finals. Collingwood the year before played in 3 finals. So 7 finals in total. Only once did they win contested possession in those 7 finals. And that was Brisbane last year, grand final day, where they annihilated Sydney. They won contested possessions by 2.
Are they close to negligible?
By 2.
Are they close to negligible losses though?
Very close.
Yeah. So you can't get blown. You can't get blown away in contests though, can you?
100% spot on. And I'm glad you said that. So I'm not diminishing the contested possession side of things. Just give me the break-even profile.
Yeah, you don't need
so Collingwood Brisbane Grand Final Day 2023, break even in contest, and really Collingwood should have probably won that grand final by a little bit more than what they did. But one of the great grand finals that we've seen for a long time.
That was a ripper.
So you just think of that 7 finals over the last 2 years for the premiers, and only once have they won contested footy. And then you look at it this year, and you look at the contested possession ladder at the moment. And Gold Coast aside, who are more often than not have actually bashed you up around contest and clearance. The other 6 best teams in the competition, Adelaide, Collingwood, Brisbane, Geelong, Hawthorn, and the Dogs, are all in that area of mid-table, just holding your own, able to
not getting beaten up there.
But what do I do with it? What do I do on the outside? And you think of the last. Over the last 2 years and the final series. So we're thinking, trim the fat. Look at best v best in September. If you win the ball use battle over the last 2 final series, there's been 18 finals, you're winning 15 of those 18. If you win the ball winning side of things, you're winning 12 of 18. So as I said, just think about that. Think about the ball use, which is harder to identify live at the ground and potentially, easier to identify back on replay when you're watching it. But this is why someone like an Ed Richards, that's why he's the number 1 rated player in the competition, because he's able to actually, hold his own from a contest situation. But you give him the footy on the outside,
makes good decisions.
Oh, God help you! Like
plus he's backing it up with really good skill.
Yeah, and someone like a Libber, I reckon Libber's ball use actually goes a little bit underrated. I think we all look at Libber when we go, oh, he's a contest player, he's a clearance player. Yeah, absolutely he is. But if I said to you this year, he's the 3rd best kick going inside 50 in the competition, you'd probably be surprised.
I would be.
But you watch him, and I know you love this, your left and your rights, and especially by hand and what have you. I don't identify that as easy as what you do. but his left and right foot, his right foot is actually quite creative.
I feel like he plays in the V-Libber. He doesn't bite off too much either. Like he knows who he is.
Yeah,
and
mid-off.
a man's got to know his limitations.
Oh, I like
right?
that. You should use that in the movie.
And he plays within his limit. Very good, mind you.
Yeah.
Very good skill set. But he doesn't bite off too much. You rarely see Libber go for a 45-metre, 45-degree kick, do you?
No, you
rarely.
No, I think that almost was the reason Melbourne came good in that game against Brisbane. That I reckon they fumbled their way out of it about 3 times, and they poor disposal, 3 or 4 disposals going inside forward 50 hurt them. And every time Brisbane got it, they were just so more precise. Even though they gave away, they probably should have been a few more goals up at half time. But Melbourne really just continually opened the door for them.
But now you look at Melbourne, and now you got Trent Rivers, highest rated player on the ground on the weekend. What's he? He's a ball user.
Yeah.
Jake Bowie across half-back, ball user. Harvey Langford comes in, ball user. Lindsay, creative with his ball use. So, Pickett, a little bit creative with his ball use. So there's a little bit of a change
Starting
there.
to balance up the Oliver. Even Petrarca's not a great ball user.
Yeah, no, he's not. He's a ball winner.
Yeah.
But now, as I said, 2025 footy is different. So give me the brain over the brawn.
Just before we move on to the rest of your talking points, Damien's taken this in a list management direction. It's quite interesting. Given the ball-winning stats, doesn't make sense that a club can get bargain inside mids like Ned Long and Tom Atkins and instead simply invest in the outside players like Dan Houston and Bailey Smith from a list management perspective.
As I said, give me the ball use over the ball. Over the ball. As I said, I'm not diminishing it, and that's why Bailey Smith's been such an addition because he's able to do both this year. But the ball users, I would have thought, G and Sammy, I would have thought they're harder to find than the absolute ball winners
and the decision makers.
That's why I always look at guys like Ollie Florent. He was sub on the weekend. What is going on wrong with his game? He's still getting it enough. He's not hitting enough targets. He's not doing enough damage. And if you've got wingmen who don't do the damage, then you just wonder where the damage is going to come from.
Omar's dropped us a text as well. You can do that. 0433 98 11 16. Omar says you missed a trick here, Hoyne. Libber, third best going inside 50. Should have been your guess who. I eagerly await your guess who tonight. All right. What on earth is this? You've got this written down here. CCO.
Yeah, CCO. Crisis creates opportunity.
Oh. Bang.
Okay, so I just want to talk about this.
Very creative himself, is he, Hoyne?
I've got to learn and learn, and Kingy's just been giving me a bit of education around this. But anyway,
the old CCO. Right.
So just want to have a look at. So there's been some big injuries to the stars of the competition this year, and there are every year. So obviously the most recent one on the weekend is Dangerfield, and then straight away everyone's like, okay, well Geelong didn't win a game, or they won one game last year and they struggled without him, but. That's why, and I always talk to you guys about this. I never really panic around the one superstar. I think when you're Sydney and you lose multiple of them, well then that's unlucky and that's reason for concern. But when you don't, the opportunity that it creates, we've seen it time and time again. So let's just run through a couple of players here. Right? So Sam Darcy, before he goes out injured, the number 1 rated player in the competition. Absolutely flying. We've put that on the radar. But now, what it's done to the Dogs since he's gone, they're averaging 120 points for, right? So their offense at the moment is flying. And we mentioned this 5-6 weeks ago with them. Potentially with how well Darcy was going, the worry could have been, does everything then just go straight through this guy, which he can get just given how well he's going. Now that he misses 3 or 4 months, you're looking at different looks, different opportunities, what our forward 50 can look like, and it is absolutely humming, knowing that this superstar is coming back into your team in round 16, 18, whenever he's actually coming back. You think of Hayden Young, recently just gone out. Absolute superstar for Freo, recently just gone out. What's that then done? That's given Shai Bolton more centre bounce minutes. And if I said to you right now, like we did with Josh Whittle a couple of weeks ago, from all the players that have qualified enough minutes as a midfielder this year, there's no midfielder that's having greater impact on the game than Shai Bolton when he plays as a midfielder.
Okay.
Crisis creates opportunity. You think of
CCO.
You think of Callum Mills last year with the Swans, right? He would have been absolutely part of their conversations to be in that centre bounce mix last year. He goes out injured. I don't know how far. A couple of weeks before the season starts. geez, we better put Isaac Heaney in there. We're a bit short on there. Crisis creates opportunity. Goes to as a number 4 rated player in the competition last year. So the Dangerfield discussion this week, everyone's thought, it's all doom and gloom. Relax. It's all good. It's all good. If you are good enough as a footy club, you will get away and you will find opportunities. Others will come in over a couple of week period and potentially make yourselves better. So, in 2022, when they were good enough, Geelong, and Dangerfield missed his standard 5-6 week period during the middle of the year, they didn't lose a game because you're good enough. If you lose, I know that might sound really basic, but it creates opportunity that then makes your footy club better when these superstars actually come back.
Well, it gives an opportunity to Ollie Henry, who's having an average year to probably a poor year. He may just go out of the goal square and find his best form.
Yep.
And someone like a Will Day. So everyone keeps telling me, Hawthorn can't play without Will Day. I don't even know what their win and loss record is without him. And they have lost 3 games this year when he hasn't been there. But they've lost by 8 points against Gold Coast, where they did so much right, and they could have easily won that game. Lost by a goal against Geelong in one of the great games of the season. He will come back, later on in the season. But this profile with Hawthorn is actually improving.
Is it?
As we're going on since he's actually departed. So again, the opportunity that it creates when your superstars leave, don't panic because things can actually, benefit when that actually does happen in a silly way.
The Dogs are just about the mayors of the CCO
they are.
situation at the moment.
My question is, what happens when Big Sam comes available? What do they do? Because I reckon they've got better because of their more mobility in the forward line. So do they challenge that?
Well, then the question is, what do you do around, with Buku, who's, played that second key forward role and is actually going along quite well. Yeah. So he's coming back in. He makes you better. But your overall program and some individuals have got that opportunity to actually showcase you, what you could actually be, in a better sense.
I'm just looking at this text. Gaddy Jack, Balmain superstar, has provided more players for Sydney than the whole of Western Sydney. He's prolific, Gary.
Well, I just had a look at that, but I just had a look at the graduates from the GWS Academy. There's a good 50-odd names in there. So
but they're
Gary Jack's not that prolific.
No, these are graduates from Western Sydney. A lot of those graduates come from the Riverina.
A lot of them do. Yeah. You are dead right.
Not
all of them, but a lot of them do.
I've done the numbers. There's 2 with Peatling.
This man does the numbers. Daniel Hoyne's with us from Champion Data. Now, the Giants, speaking of them, they're already thin in midfield. Finn Callahan's going to miss at least the next month with that partial shoulder dislocation. They've got Daniels, Cornelio, Kelly, and now Callahan out. So Adam Kingsley's going to have to get creative, Hoyne.
Yeah, he is, and I wouldn't challenge G on that GWS situation there, Sammy. So if there's one person that I know that that covers off more than that, it's the great man Gerard. But
yes,
but so the Giants conversation. Right? So they've only won 1 game in their last 5 weeks, but I just want to talk about more bigger picture with what they've actually produced over the last 12 months. So post-bye last year. The reality is that their profile, and I know that they got so close to potentially getting to through to a prelim, and who knows what could have happened. But the reality is that their profile for a best part of a 12-month period has relied on 2 things. It's relied on Jesse Hogan having an unbelievable patch of form, and it's relied on the opposition's inaccuracy. So I think that you can control your own accuracy in terms of where you take your shots, who's taking them, the degree of difficulty. But the opposition, all you can do is just force them into take, challenging shots, which just takes into account. And there's no one that's been more fortunate than what they have with their opposition's inaccuracy over the last 12 months than what GWS has. So you look over the last 5 weeks, and this is continuing again. So in 5 weeks, they've lost 4 of their 5 games. The 1 game where they've won, it took Jesse Hogan to kick 7.
Yep.
And it took Geelong to miss opportunities in front of goal to get that win. So, they have some midfield concerns at the moment with Kelly, out injured, and now Callahan out injured. But this isn't just a new problem. This is, as I said, this is a 12-month period. And you look at the back end of last year, right? So when they got on that run and they finished top 4 and they got almost through to a prelim, 7 times their opposition kicked to expectation from an accuracy point of view. So the opposition took the chances that they should have.
Yep.
When that happened, GWS only won twice. 2 times out of 7 when their opposition were accurate. When they weren't accurate, they cashed in and they were able to get scoreboard return. That can only last for so long. And even Fremantle on the weekend, Fremantle had plenty of opportunities to actually even blow that game out. So they have issues that are just more sort of bigger picture than just the last 5 weeks. It's been more of around what's happened over the last 12 months. How they get out of this is going to be really challenging and really interesting to see what Adam Kingsley does. But I was sort of looking from afar, admire what he does. I like how they play. I like his coaching philosophy. How they actually get out of this is going to be his greatest test as a coach in his first 3 seasons in charge.
Didn't have a great trade period, did they, unfortunately? And they lost some real talent there.
Yeah, they lost the 3 mids.
I think they knew what they were missing, what they were going to lose.
Yeah.
They tried to keep them, but nature of the beast, I guess.
I think they went unders with Peatling. And he got out the door before they realised that he was too good a player. Started to improve really rapidly in the last 6 or 7 games of that year.
Been a great recruit, hasn't he, down at Adelaide. Now, speaking of Adelaide, they lost their 10th consecutive game to Collingwood at the weekend. But what are you seeing in them?
I thought that was a really strange game on Saturday. I was actually really looking forward to it and then sat down and watched it, and it was a bit sort of flat. It was a bit more of a dour game. I know conditions were wet and whatever.
Conditions didn't suit.
And Collingwood are the best defensive team in the competition. So, I think as Gary said on the coverage, you get into a scrap with the best scrappers in the comp, good luck to you. So,
particularly in the wet.
Yeah.
If you're going to try and penetrate a good defence, you'd rather a dry ball, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So, and that's where I want to get into the conversation with Adelaide. So, again, we don't just jump on a win and a loss on this show. It's more bigger picture side of things. So they get to their first 5 weeks, and I'm interested to see what you two think around this. They get to their first 5 weeks, and offensively they are flying. They're through the roof. But defensively, there's room to move. Geelong had just kicked 119, 120 points against them. Gold Coast got short of 100, probably should have got over 100, and their defensive profile wasn't rock solid. It was the 11th best profile in the competition. So not horrendous, but not historically where the best teams have been. But offensively, they were the second best profile in the competition. That was their asset. Now, over the last 5 weeks, they're number 3 defensively with what they're doing without the footy. So tick. But now they're bottom 4 with what they're doing with the footy. And I don't know, as I said, this is what I'm interested to get your own thoughts.
Not just scoring.
How they're moving it, their accuracy in front of goal, their forward 50, how that's working, and their overall conversion when they win the footy, and then to be able to get that onto the scoreboard. So I almost compare them to Brisbane. So Brisbane at the halfway stage last year, where we were saying their profile was they were doing a lot right. Defensively, they were top 2, top 3 in the competition.
Yep.
But offensively, they were mid-table to 12th, 13th in the comp. Then the back end of the year last year, Brisbane, where they lose 2 games, 3 games for the back end of the year. Their offensive profile was just ridiculous. It was, okay, you're going to have to score 90-plus points to beat this team. Defensively, still fine, but it was 5th, 6th, 7th in the comp. That's all where they needed to be.
What's the best balance? I mean, you'd like to be 1-1, but can you be?
But I think this is where you just got to be realistic.
Yeah.
How many profiles do you see over our 25, 26 years of doing this where you're 1-1? You just, you're very rarely seeing only 2-3 times over that period. So if I'm Adelaide, I'm looking at the offensive side of things and trying to unleash that and prioritising that and copying a defensive profile that's 5, 6, 7 in the comp like Brisbane. Because I don't know, do you look at Adelaide G and think offense is their point of difference?
Yeah,
offense is what's going to scare you?
Yeah. I think their middle is mid-range. I think their defence is reasonable, but I like the 3 tools, and I like Rochelle, and I like it even more when Isaac Rankin plays inside the forward 50. And they've got Keys, who's he's an interesting unit, but he's a very effective unit.
The 3 forwards are going to be an interesting conversation going forward because they wouldn't expect surely that Tex is going to play every week. So do they have a moment where they think...
Well, they got Curtin who's coming through who can be that third...
Or do they change philosophy altogether and play with 2 tools? They just play with Fogarty and Thilthorpe, see what that looks like. I don't know. Like
Probably
it's made of the
anyway,
winter weather
said.
and the game slows down. I mean, maybe, I don't know. But philosophically, that might be something they wrestle with and they come back to the 3. I don't know.
and their ball movement. A couple of weeks ago we categorised each team into a ball movement category. Their speed of ball movement has now gone into the pause category. They're holding it.
Right.
I just wonder if they need to unleash that a little bit more, the Crows.
I can hear some music starting,
Guess
so
who?
you better get the guess who out.
Nervous time. Okay, who's the number one team in the competition
Corey said
at winning the ball?
You embarrassed their workplace last
Number
night.
one team in the competition at winning the ball across halfback and getting it onto the scoreboard. Number one team in the comp.
The Rebound Kings.
Yep, the Premiers have been number one in 4 of the last 6 years.
Just dropped a guess who on us, Gerard. The side that is the best in the competition at taking it from halfback to putting it on the scoreboard.
Well, it was St Kilda last year, and everybody blued about the Saints going slow. They were quick, and all their energy came off the half-back line. So
Some of these...
hard to run with the Saints after the weekend.
Steve's going with Adelaide. There's Collingwood by a country mile. Geelong, says Kevin. Even the Blues go look in here. Collingwood or Crows, says Michael. I'm going to go something different. I might be way off base here, but just you got to go with your gut sometimes. I just love what Rioli and Noble are doing at the Suns. They're pretty attacking, at least to the eye it looks like they are. So I'm going to nominate Gold Coast.
I'm going to go with you.
Oh,
I'm rolling with you.
we're supposed to diversify our ability to
we're
nut
rolling
him.
with you.
And, oh.
There's a bit of infighting here, isn't there? Yeah, it's
No,
good.
we're actually
No,
united,
it's good.
Hoyne.
Yeah, no, it's good, and you've just handed me a much needed victory. So I appreciate the infighting. Keep that up, gentlemen. So the number one team this year at moving it from halfback onto the scoreboard, Fremantle Dockers.
You got to be joking.
Number one in the competition at the moment. 1, Fremantle. 2, Collingwood. 3, the Western Bulldogs. So they're in good company.
Yep. There was a bit of
They're
love
in
for the
good
Dogs
company.
off the text.
And
No
as I
one nailed Fremantle.
Yeah, and as I said, 4 of the last 6 premiers have been number one in this area.
Yep.
And last year, the back end of last year, post-bye, Brisbane were number one in the competition. So not number one across the season, but in the back end when they got on their run, that's where they got going. So the trampoline area. So that's why I just wanted to talk about Fremantle and just a couple of components here. So I think we're all fascinated around the method with their ball movement and this hold, and then go. And, do we want them to play a little bit quicker? Well, that was their 3rd quickest game for the season.
Right.
On the weekend against the Giants. That was one of their quickest opening quarters that we've seen for the year. It was slightly different to what we're seeing with this Fremantle pause mentality that we've spoken about. So this speed of ball movement, as we keep talking about, AFL average is 100 for speed.
Yeah.
Right? So Fremantle have played 40 quarters for the season. Only 10 quarters this season have they gone at a speed above AFL average, so above the 100 mark. You know what they've done when they've done that? They've lost 1 quarter for the year
When
they've gone quick for the year. If that's not an indication of what you got off the back of this, so the trampoline area, there's no more dominant team in the competition in that. History stacks up. Back history until history changes. The speed side of things, 10 times for the year, 10 quarters for the year, you've gone at a speed above AFL average. You've lost once.
Surely they know all this.
You've lost one.
Well, the eye tells you that, doesn't it?
You've lost 1 quarter for the year. So, yeah, we saw it a little bit at times against GWS, against, as we talked about, a GWS team that's not going too well at the moment. Let's have a look at this now for the next 4 or 5 weeks because the data is there. And the other side of things to the data that I just want to talk about. So we mentioned Shai Bolton. Out of all the players that qualify for the amount of minutes that you've played as a midfielder, most impact of any midfielder in the comp. Out of all the ruckmen that qualify for ruck minutes this year, Luke Jackson is clearly having the most impact as a ruck this year, clearly. So Tristan Cherry, number 2, Max Gawn's up there, Darcy Cameron. But when they're playing as a ruck, Luke Jackson is miles ahead.
So that's the sort of gold that you get
ruck.
on Tuesday night between 6 and 7.
Love it. Now, just before we get to Essendon, Sydney, Geelong and the Dogs and a number of other things you want to talk about, can we just write this down as homework? I just feel like we need a deep dive on the Blues and their skill level. And over the course of 4 quarters where they rate, but I'm particularly fascinated by the second halves of games. Now, I know the record is obvious and it's been well documented, but does their skill level actually drop away in second halves as they come under ongoing heat? Are there other factors? Their skill level looks shocking.
So they do a lot right, Carlton, as we said. But we get back to the top of the show. Brains over brawn.
Not enough brains.
Brawn, Carlton, number one. Number one contested possession team in the comp. Brains, number 18 kicking team in the comp. Off kick rating. So 2025 footy with where it's going and the frustration because I can see like the profile that they're putting together. Carlton is close. They do a lot right.
Yep.
But 2025 footy,
too dumb.
The use, the brain, too whack. The use is just not there, unfortunately, for the Blues. But I will put that on next week's agenda to do a deeper
I'd like a little
dive
forensic analysis.
into the brains
Okay,
analysis.
the IQ count.
That could be torturous.
Can you tell us what par is for the IQ? I like this.
All right. The Essendon Footy Club, they've been in the news over the last 24 hours for all things off-field. What's happening on it?
Yeah, so obviously, we put Essendon on the radar last week just around, this defence and is the defensive profile real and what have you, and the results were there for everyone to see that on the weekend. Just interesting to track how that goes. I wouldn't expect too much change with how they want to defend over the next couple of weeks, but just wanted to put that on watch like we did. But I think Friday night, Dreamtime, MCG, Richmond, if you're an Essendon supporter, there is one thing that you can almost be guaranteed with what's going to be on the whiteboard, and that's pressure and their ability to stick tackles. So there's tackles and then there's missed tackles. So they had 99 opportunities on the weekend, Essendon, to lay a tackle to prevent a Bulldogs player from getting an effective disposal away. Only 46 times did they do this. That's the worst return we've seen by any team for 2 years, for more than 2 years. So some players, right? So Setterfield on the weekend tried to lay 12 tackles, only laid 6 effective tackles. AFL average is about 70%. Zach Merritt did something that we have rarely seen from Zach Merritt's career. 6 times he tried to lay a tackle for zero
return for
tackles.
Zach.
Only the third
He was
time,
flat on the weekend,
only
wasn't
the third time in his career, Zach, where he actually hasn't laid a tackle. Someone like a Jackson Pryor playing in your back half.
Yeah.
5 times you tried to lay a tackle on the weekend, only once.
Yeah, he's got some work to do, Jackson.
Like you can't get away with those sort of numbers. So Friday night, that's probably the only thing I would have thought if you're an Essendon supporter that you're going along to see, can we stick it against a team of lesser quality than the Bulldogs, especially around, from a midfield perspective? Can we get to work and actually prevent that from happening to protect our back half?
Saw Kingy's vision of Essendon defending the Bulldogs on the first crack, which was excellent.
Yep.
It just didn't switch from attack to defence mentally enough either. You had no tackling into that, Hoyne. You're going to get poleaxed.
Yeah, so just a couple of things just to keep an eye on for Friday night with the Bombers outside of the absolute, raw scoreboard return defensively.
All right, where do we go to next?
Sydney.
Yeah, Sydney. So I think we've spoken about it at times on this show. Dean Cox couldn't have made it any clearer over the off-season what he wants to work on. And he wants to work on how they defend, and he wants to work on their contest method. And you can understand that with what their contest profile was towards the back end of last year and what their defensive profile was towards the back end of last year. And, you're probably got to be a little bit patient, obviously, with the injury side of things, but then, the individuals, trying to learn, what he's trying to teach them. But over the last 6 weeks, you're starting to see it. So they've got the third best defensive 50 in the competition over the last 6 weeks. Tom McCartan's now playing permanent back. The results are there for everyone to see. They are the hardest team in the competition over the last 6 weeks to go from one end of the ground to the other. So you're starting to see that defensive mindset. And then over the last 6 weeks, they're the number one ground ball team in the competition over a 6-week period. So yes, their offensive profile is nowhere near at the levels of what it was last year for various reasons. You can understand from a talent side of things, as we talked about with Goulden and Papley being so important to what they did on the scoreboard last year. But I think clearly the priorities under the new Dean Cox method has been around defence and has been around contest, and you're starting to see that as well as the stars starting to come back. So Blakey, Heaney, Warner, all inside the top 50 players again this season, whereas Heaney and Warner in particular took a bit of time to get going.
Where do they come up on the IQ/dumb scale?
Oh, geez, where do they come up with that? So I think from a ball use perspective, they're high.
Okay.
They're high, and they'll only get high when Papley and Gould in particular start to come back in there. So they've got a little bit to work with. I'm just interested to see whether or not, a bit like what Adam Kingsley did with GWS in his first year in charge, where he wanted to change the way in which they defend, in which they played the transition game, and they were 4-7, 4-8 the halfway stage, and then it all clicked in the back end of the year. Whether or not that potentially happens with Sydney moving forward over the next few weeks.
The Bailey Smith Cup is Thursday night, Geelong and the Western Bulldogs. In fact, Brian's brought this to our attention. Boys, the worst jumper clash of all time is coming Thursday night. Both Indigenous jumpers of Cats and Dogs look exactly the same. It can't be allowed. I just had a look at them both too, Brian. Yep. Surely they won't go in like that. There'll be a clash jumper worn of some kind, surely. But anyway, we digress. Cats, Dogs.
This is a battle of the brains. So the reason why they are good is what they do with ball in hand. And the stoppage game, is 35% of scoring. We talk about the transition game being, the one that stacks up. But right now, what these two teams do from a stoppage situation, they are the two most deadliest teams in the competition.
From stoppage.
So that's a talent situation. And you watch what both of them do at stoppage, and they do it slightly differently. So the Dogs' ability to be able to convert their own first possession and then chain out and then get forward and then see Richards and Bont shoulders out looking for Norton, Buku, Riley West, whoever it might be. But then the Cats. So their ability to be able to win first possession and convert that into a clearance chain is actually one of the poorest teams in the competition. But they value the quality of it. There's no dumping from them. They don't just want to get the footy and then dump it. So they'll risk not being able to chain out. But when they do chain out, that is why the scoreboard returns that they get are so astronomically high. The difference between it with how important that phase is going to be, the difference between it is how they defend it. So there's no harder team in the comp to score against off clearance than Geelong, and the Dogs are mid-table.
Right.
So the challenge will be for the Cats. Can they hold up against what the Dogs have got in that midfield?
Interesting that they're 1 and 2, and one's got a once All-Australian ruckman, the other one's a makeshift ruckman.
English and Blitzarves, and off our ratings again with the ruck situation, what Blitzarves is doing as a ruckman at the moment is ridiculous. Okay. What he's actually doing, but the fascination around this game is obviously for other reasons. But remember a couple of weeks ago we put all the teams into the categories, and there was a TV guide category.
Yep.
This is where these two teams sat in the TV guide. They change week on week based on what the opposition are going to give you. And I heard the Bulldogs players post game getting interviewed after Saturday night, and he said that that's what Beveridge preaches.
Yep.
You have to play multiple positions, and 1 week you might be here, 1 week you might be there. You see Geelong do that. So so Dangerfield going out, Bowes going out, Blitzarves. What will he do on Thursday night? And then the wild card in all this, with how important that stoppage situation is, where this new tagger Mallon goes to for Geelong. Like his job on Zach Butters on the weekend was one of the great jobs that I've seen on Zach
Richards,
Butters.
doesn't he? Is Richards being tagged?
100%.
Has
he has
he
to
been
go to
tagged
Zach,
ever?
to Richards. But then the interesting part will be Beveridge and the TV guide. Yeah. What does he do?
That's right.
What does he do with Richards? So there's so many moving parts to this Thursday night. We hardly preview a game on this show, but given it's only 2 days away and how big it is, just thought it was worth a bit of a preview.
Tex has just come through to get extra points for ripping the headband off.
A tackle. You get more. No, you don't, but you get a few brains associated to that.
There you go. Battle of the brains. Oppenheimer v. Einstein on Thursday night.